First is we start today and we zoom out in the future and we say, what is our hypothesis of what the long-term trends will be? I'm going to propose a little bit later what a possible hypothesis is. Hello, it is great to be with you. My name is Kaihan Krippendorff. I studied mechanical engineering. I never got to practice. My son is committed now to be a civil engineer. Yes, 15 years old, and he already knows that that's where he wants to head. So I want to, just appreciate, I'm really glad to be here with you, in part because of the work you do, but also because I think that we're about to enter a very exciting new game. And sometimes the games change in all domains, right? It was before 1968. The game of going over a high bar looked like this. There were 4 techniques. It was a scissor, a straddle, a roll, always a forward technique. And then in 1968, in the Olympics in Mexico, this gentleman decided to turn his back on that tradition. He goes over the backwards, and he wins the Olympics by doing, what was this technique called? The Fosbury flop. So 2 things I just want to point out about this. The rules change, and often we're slow to adapt. In this case, what changed in the external environment was a new technology. That technology were pads that were put on the other side of high bars. But anyone want to guess how long before 1968 we were putting pads on the other side of high bars? 15 years before. So it kind of begs the question, if this technically was feasible, why didn't we do it 4 years before, or 8 years before, or 12 years before? And what I propose is missing is not an understanding of the technology, but rather the concepts around the technology. Let me explain that. Let's think of language as a toolkit. The language we use shapes what we see, what options we choose. And until we have the words to describe how to use this technology, we don't really know what to do with it. Until you have the word Fosbury flop, it's not a coincidence that alliterates, that many of us know the words. Until you have that word, you can't call a coach and say, hey, can you teach me the Fosbury flop? You can't get a book on the Fosbury flop. There are no conference breakout sessions on the Fosbury flop. So I'm going to propose that the rules are changing. We're going to need to adopt a new mindset. That mindset is embedded in the language we use to strategize. And I'm going to propose later that there are 5 key concepts. I'm going to introduce language that allows you to naturally bring those concepts into your strategizing. When we go through this, I'm hoping that you're going to come up with some ideas. And I'm going to kind of push us to think a little bit further than we normally think, stepping out, zooming out a little bit into the future, using logic in a new way. And it's going to have you come up with ideas, and you're going to know it's a good idea if, when you bring it back to your team, you know someone's going to say, are you crazy? Every gold medal winner has gone over forward. Every trainer of every Olympic athlete has gone over forward. You go over forward. That's the only sign that potentially we're introducing a new idea that could be part of or could change the new game. I also believe that right now is a great time to change the game because the rules are changing. When the rules of the games change, now in your work, the rules that determine what the optimal answer is are physical laws. But when we're building our firms, the physical laws are not permanent. They don't matter. The rules, the laws of physics in a way change. Technologies, regulations, norms. And the rules are changing. When the rules change, it allows us to play a different game. Let's stay with sports for one more minute. Let's look at the average height of the last 5 NBA most valuable players. So I looked at the 5 players leading up to 1960 that were each ranked the most valuable each year, average out their height, and what we can see is that they're a little bit over 80 inches tall. Over the next 2.5 decades, we see a very clear trend. The best players are getting what? Taller. Something weird happens in the 5 years leading up to 1985. Suddenly, the best players are shorter. Now, maybe there are 1 or 2 short players, so maybe it's an anomaly. Let's play this out further. What do we see now? It looks like maybe there's a new norm where the best players are about 80 inches. But actually, no, it doesn't seem to be a new norm. It seems to be a new trend. The best players seem to be getting shorter and shorter and shorter. I propose it because the rules changed a little bit around 1980. What changed? The three-point shot gets introduced. And some teams adapt to the new game, others do not. And games change in business. Sometimes they are externally triggered, sometimes they are internally generated, and we've seen this over and over again. In the Yahoo days, the game was about getting people to use your portal. They let Google do search. They didn't think that was valuable. The rules changed, and what mattered was search, and we see a flip. There was a day where music was really about high quality music, signing great artists, putting them on DVD, CDs that were really high quality, and then the rules changed. Then the game was really about distribution and being able to get 1,000 songs in your pocket. Before Henry Ford introduced line production, it was all about craftsmanship. Before IBM asked Microsoft to do this thing that nobody wanted to do, build an operating system, it was all about hardware. But it doesn't mean necessarily that we have to give up the new game, the old game. We can shift to the new game. Garmin, I think, did a great job with this. They started building, GPSs in cars when that was eroded by what Michael Porter would call a substitute, a phone. They had already been in wearables, and they're killing it because they learned to play the new game. How do we play the new game? We need to come up with new ideas, and a lot of new ideas. This is Ray Kroc, founder of modern-day McDonald's. He said, my attitude was that competition can try to copy my style, but they can't read my mind. So I'll leave them 1.5 miles behind. So let's think about our ability to introduce a new game as a result of a flow of ideas that come out of our heads into our teams, into the market. We kind of overwhelm the competition with these ideas, like water, looking at every nook and cranny for an opportunity. Now, there are some ideas that are more valuable than others. Ideas that your competition will copy quickly are less valuable than ideas that they'll take a long time to copy. And so all of these innovators that I've studied, they all look for a certain type of idea. They call it different things. I like what Gandhi uses to describe this idea. He said, first they ignore you, then they laugh at you, then they fight you, and then you win. So I'm encouraging you to come up with ideas that your competition, those who would resist you, those who would copy you, those who would want to stop you, whoever they are, instead we want them to ignore and laugh at us. And I invite you to call this idea, just for today, I find this a really helpful metaphor, the fourth option. And it's just a metaphor. 3 symbolizes the point at which we think we have enough options. Why? Why 3? Well, it's just a metaphor. The strongest shape is a triangle with 3 sides and 3 corners. Great orders repeat in 3s. When I was trained as a consultant at McKinsey, they told me to break everything down into 3s and 3 sets of 3s and 3 sets of 3s. 3 just sort of symbolizes, okay, we got the options. Let's start narrowing down the options. And what it means when you have your 3 options and you've stopped looking for new options is it means that you've gone lazy, that you're not looking for new ways. When you hear someone say, I've been in this industry for 30 years, the answer is 1, 2, 3. I've solved this problem before. The answer is A, B, C. It may be that their combined experience has led them on the optimal answer or set of answers, but it also means they've stopped looking for new options. And what these innovators do is recognize where people have stopped thinking and look for a 4th option. Let me give you one example of kind of what it feels like to compete with someone who introduces a new game by introducing a 4th option. And we're going to get to technology and business and things like that. Let's just go back in time a little bit. Ancient times in China, the way that wealthy people entertained themselves is they'd race horses. And there was one general, and he was frustrated because he kept losing to the prince. So he asked an advisor for help. The advisor said, I usually work on military problems, so I have some time on my hand. Let me observe this game. And he studied. This is a very simple game. You basically race 3 sets of horses. Your fastest, your medium, your slowest. The best 2 out of 3 win, as a result of which there are 3 ways to win this game. You need better horses, better riders, or provide better care and feeding. And your problem, General, is that since the prince has more money, he can buy better horses, he can hire better riders, he can provide better care and feeding. But I see a 4th option. Let's challenge the prince to one last competition. Let's really lay down the gauntlet. Let's say this is the competition that will determine the rivalry. I want you to invite the entire town, all of your family and friends. We're going to do a week from Thursday. General's a little nervous about this, really high social stakes, but he trusts his advisor as your clients trust you. And he's still told, a week from Thursday, like this is like the Super Bowl of horse racing. The town is empty. Everyone's in the stadium, excited, talking about who's going to win, how it's going to unfold, and the drums roll, and everyone goes quiet. The prince begins the sequence. He prepares his best horses. They go up to the gate, and the general prepares his best horses, and the advisor says, wait, if you play the game the way you've always played, you know what the outcome's going to be. If you want to change the outcome, if you want to change the game, you need to change how you play it. I want you to put your slowest horses first. And that changes the outcome of the game. He changed the game with one move, but we're facing many moves, many reasons, many three-point shots that are allowing us to play the game differently. I run a peer network of chief strategy officers of large enterprises, and we get together and we talk about what their concerns are, what is on their radar, and here is what is on their radar. I've added 3 more that are particularly relevant for you. If these aren't on your radar, then maybe you should look at putting them on your radar. Of course, AI at the center is on the radar of strategy officers. But now we have also IoT and connected spaces that are producing a lot of data, resulting in proliferation of data. Advances in APIs are now enabling us to share that data and process it and put it into our AI machines. We've got robotics and automation, both physical and digital. 3D printing is a technology that I think is going to have a much more transformative impact than we expect. It sort of feels a little bit that it is no longer as exciting, but is coming back. We're going to talk about new organizational models, and the hierarchical model of managing a firm is starting to give way to a different type of model. Of course, we've got next generation employees, next generation talent, next generation buyers, next generation customers. Of course, climate change, the drive for sustainability. We also have geopolitical, regulatory uncertainty, as we're talking about now, with regard to tariffs and to government spend, to infrastructure spend. The digitization of value, more and more of what our customers buy is digitally delivered. I'll give you an example, say an automobile. 30 years ago, when you bought a new automobile, 100% of the value of what you paid for was physically delivered. Today, when you buy a new car, about 50% of what you pay for is digitally delivered, whether those are cameras or sensors or displays. So more and more of what we deliver can be digital. Of course, we've got talent, recruiting talent, retaining talent, and connected users. We'll talk a little bit about this in a little bit, but the things that you build and the people that you interact with and the people who interact with the things that you build, it used to be a transaction that happened periodically, and now it is increasingly being an ongoing flow of information. Every time they move, they're spitting out like buttons, and we're starting to change our relationship to an ongoing, ever-on relationship. For you, you also have consolidation. PE investments, PE firms love the attractiveness of what you do, and we're starting to see, roll-ups. Digital twins is sort of a double click, if you will, on the digital value, but I know that that is particular technology that creates all kinds of interesting opportunities, but also dilemmas for you, overall margin pressure. And so I really think that all sectors, but particularly your sector, that you are on the cusp of this moment where the game is changing. And you have a choice of which game are you going to play. Are you going to keep going over the high bar forward, or are you going to learn to and create the game of going over the high bar backward? So I want to walk you through a process. It's like 5 steps, and there's some sub-steps, and try to really get under the mechanics of how games change and how we can create these 4th options in order to be relevant and shape this future game. Sound good? How do games change? I think that if we look at all of those game changes in business, what we see is that they follow a predictable pattern. The first is that the job to be done doesn't change, but we thought the job to be done of our customers was different than what the job was. So music companies thought that people wanted high-quality music, but the real job to be done might have been to entertain myself, to alter my state, to relax. That core job didn't get done. But what did change was a new way to get the job done. Instead of a DVD of a highly produced music getting put into a machine, what happened was the MP3 player. And Apple saw that the way to get the job done was going to be different. Now, when the way to get the job done is different, then what happens is profit pools shift because the choke point shifts. It no longer becomes as important to find and recruit and develop talent and produce really high-quality songs. What becomes more important is the ability to digitally distribute those and large volumes of them. And so Apple found that people didn't really want a higher fidelity song. They could bring down the fidelity, people wouldn't notice, but they wanted 1,000 songs. And they wanted a big selection, right? So you see how the choke point shifts, and then profit shifts to where the choke point is. then therefore the capabilities that you need to compete with that choke point are different than the other ones. It's about technology, it's about distribution, it is about designing devices that get in people's hands, it's about usability, and I think what it really then comes down to is the winning mindset, or I would say the playbook changes. The kind of playbook that you need as an Apple to deliver a digital experience is very different than Universal Music needed to find and develop great music. And this mindset is underappreciated because we can't see it. But if we look at the companies that have, I'm going to put it back one more time because I saw some people taking a photo of this, and I'm happy to make the slides available for you guys. Let's take Blockbuster. For a long time, I told this story. You've probably heard this story before, right? Netflix creates their service offering. They call themselves Netflix before the internet even really becomes a streaming option because they foresaw, and Blockbuster didn't see it coming, and they were old and slow. But you know, actually, I was telling a lie because actually Blockbuster did understand and appreciate and valued the strategy of Netflix. They actually created a whole nother division, Blockbuster.com. They put them in a different building, separated them culturally, and they said, just go and do the Netflix model. And it seemed like they did everything right, but when they released their website, they realized that Netflix didn't even have a website. It was this dynamic, interactive experience that each individual customer saw a different offerings. And they were thinking like a store. So it was the mindset of, I'm putting a store online versus I'm going to deliver an individual experience to a customer. These mindsets, we need to understand that they take time to adapt. When a game changes, when you learn a new game, like Dick Fosbury had to learn how to approach the bar from a different angle, how to explode up, how to twist in midair. You can't just learn that. You need to practice it and practice it. My daughter plays soccer. We'll see a video of her a little bit later. And we were in LA, I'm from Miami, but we were at a tournament down in LA. They played 2 games on 2 different days. The first day, they did all right. You know, they won, but they won like 3-2. Then we had a day off, and then the next day, they dominated 7-1. And the difference was, on day 2, they had the day off, we went to see a soccer game. My 4 nephews play professional soccer, and they happened to be doing some kind of like game here, and we watched them, and we got to sit on the grass, and we heard the coach. And the coach was like, do not let them turn. If they turn, do not let them pass. If they pass, do not let the other person get it. Be on them, like, do not give them an inch. It was a style of play. And the girls went back to the game the next day, and they had started embodying this new way of playing, and they dominated. It takes effort. It takes effort to adopt this new playbook. But I want to lay it out for you is 5 steps that you can take to begin adopting a new playbook. I believe all models are wrong. Some are useful. I forced this model to spell IDEAS, ideas, just with the hope that maybe, you know, if you're strategizing, you think, hey, maybe we need some 4th option ideas. How do we do that? Oh, let's remember. Well, first thing we need to do is we need to imagine. Practice the habit of mental time travel, something that humans could do, very few animals could do, and zoom out and imagine a different future. And I'm going to suggest kind of 5 sub-steps there. The next is breaking down the system. You do a fishbone exercise, a root cause analysis, something like that. But I'm going to suggest a different framework that you can use, particularly for your business model. And then there's the expanding of options, the ideation, the solution, the hypothesis generation. And I'm going to suggest 5 patterns that we can use to do that more creatively. And then there is analyzing or choosing of the solutions. And I'm going to suggest how we do that very simply so that we avoid doing what most companies do, is just do what they've done before. The final step, which we're not going to cover here, is sell. That is to build internal buy-in and support for the new idea. This is a methodology. If you want, I have a workbook I can give you. We've trained several hundreds of people in Raytheon and Lockheed Martin and other places in it. It's no magic to it. It's just like a set of steps. And if you follow them, what you find is your team just starts thinking differently. Sound good? Great. I'm going to primarily focus on expand, but I'm going to just go fairly quickly through imagine, dissect, and I'm going to finish shortly with analyze. So imagine is just about mental time travel, as I said. It's about envisioning the future. That younger son that I mentioned that wants to be a civil engineer, I play chess with him quite often. He beats me all the time. My strategy is like this. It's like, let me take my pawns and I'll move them forward. Hopefully I can get you into checkmate. What does he do is exactly the opposite. He envisions checkmate and then works backward from there to see what the near-term move is. Now, we all know that when we're strategizing, that's what we should be doing. But many of the strategic tools we use to set our goals, they encourage us to play like me, like a bad chess player. We do a SWOT analysis. We look at historical trends. We take lines and we draw them forward. And we think, what would be a reasonable but stretched set of goals based off of past performance? And you know, if you give an engineer a solution that can be achieved with just a minor improvement on the past solution, it's safer to come up with an adjustment to the past solution. But if you give them a challenge that cannot be achieved with what we've done before, it requires us to rethink the solution. So here is a way to require your team to rethink the solution. You guys are super smart. I'm going to go through this very quickly. I'm just going to list these out. I will give you the slides. I'll give you the workbook. So if you don't, these 5 steps, I find that these work really well. First is we start today and we zoom out in the future and we say, what is our hypothesis of what the long-term trends will be? I'm going to propose a little bit later what a possible hypothesis is. But we zoom out 10 years from now and get your people to think when AI meets sustainability meets digitization or something like that, what does that together mean? And then we want them to still be zoomed out 10 years from now and build that burning platform, define what we don't want to achieve. Get them to say, if we continue doing what we're doing, in that future, what will the outcome be? And hopefully it's not an outcome we want. Then we say, okay, well, given that, what do we want? What's our long-term ideal? This is like idealized problem solving from systems thinking. And what was great is they'll get, because you're thinking 10 years out, they're kind of free, they're willing to like envision and dream. And then you've sort of like tricked them, get them attached to that, and then say, okay, given that's where we want to be in 10 years, in 3 years, what must be true for us to know without a doubt we're on the path to the long term? And that starts feeling uncomfortable. And then if you have time, you just convert that into your strategic question. So very easy to do these 5 steps. After you've done that, people are going to start coming up with ideas. And you know how if you give a child a hammer, everything looks like a nail? We all fall victim to that. We tend to look over and over again at the same leverage points or the same way of solving the problem. You know, if you're working with your marketing people, oh, marketing ideas. If you're working with your tech people, oh, technology ideas. If you're working with your people, it's like, oh, organizational ideas. And so here's a quick checklist. Again, all models are wrong. Some are useful. I find this to be a really nice checklist to quickly go through with your team to make sure that you're focused on the right things. Because when the game changes, the capabilities change, and those capabilities require that you use a different part of your business to compete. So here are 9. Positioning. In this new game, who should our core customer be and who shouldn't they be? Product. What do we need to now outperform on and what can we underperform on? Going back to Apple, they needed to outperform on digital delivery. They could underperform, therefore, on music quality. Pricing. Who pays, when they pay, on what basis they pay. We always know that people are willing to pay more when they get the value. But we are mostly setting our price long before our customers get the value. So could we move when our customers pay closer to when the bridge doesn't break, when traffic patterns do change, right? So we can start thinking differently about pricing. Maybe it's about placement. What distribution channels should we use? Where should we be fishing for our customers? Promotions, marketing, and sales. How do we get them aware? How do we get them to consider? How do we get them to choose? What are new ways to get them through the funnel and acquire customers at a lower cost or faster speed? The physical experience that we deliver to our customers. So both pre-build, during build, and post-build, during maintenance, how can we innovate on that physical experience? Again, Apple, they dominated on physical experience, and that's one of the key leverage points that they win by. Once we've defined that, now we have to operationalize it. So it's what are our processes that we need to change in order to deliver on that? And then it's our people. Who do we need to hire? How do we organize them? What are our incentive structure? What should our values be in order to deliver on the rest of the stack? And then finally, last but first, purpose. What is our purpose? What's the purpose that's going to activate all of the stakeholders and ecosystem that we need to win the new game? So, 9 Ps. Now we need to get to the meat of what I wanted to cover with you. What you've done now is you've stepped out, you've imagined a future, and you have chosen a leverage point, and now it's time to ideate, to generate hypotheses. And the question here is, how do great strategists see these strategic options that others don't see? How many people have seen the TV series The Queen's Gambit? So you remember the scene in The Queen's Gambit where she plays as the whole men's team, and she goes from one board, she sees the winning move, the next board she sees the winning move, next board she sees the winning move, and she wins all of the games, right? How can she do that? Well, it has to do with the fact that at the beginning of a game, the way to play is different than at the end of the game. At the end of the game, where your degrees of freedom are less, logic is helpful. At the beginning of the game, when our degrees of freedom or the possible permutations of outcomes are much broader, what works better are patterns rather than logic. And it's actually been measured that master chess players recognize twice as many patterns as experts, and grandmasters recognize 10 times as many. I believe fundamentally there are 36 strategic patterns. My first 2 books were based off of this. My doctorate work is based off of this. Of these 36, there are 5 that what we're seeing, companies that are really thriving in the new game, this is the playbook they seem to be using. This is their Fosbury flop. So I'm just going to briefly go through each of these and just tell you a couple stories so that you can start thinking this way. When you go back with your team, you can just go back to them with these 5 and ask some brainstorming questions. Yeah? All right. First one's pretty simple. What we need to be doing thinking now is increasingly skating to where the puck is going to be rather than where the puck is. This is important because the future is getting to us much more quickly. And it's not about moving faster as much as it is already preparing for the next game while we are building the current game. And I want to propose a possible future I think maybe will bring to clarity many of these trends. This is from my last book, Proximity. If we look at these trends, and I've just reworded them here the way I originally worded them. If we look at these, there are 4 trends that move us from physical customers to digital customers, as described before, where our users, we have an ongoing interactive relationship with our users, so we move away from transactions to relationships. And we can sense needs and emerging needs, more minute needs, more rapidly, and we can respond to them. A lot of these trends, or 5 of these trends, they lead us to move from economies of scale to personalization at scale. Say 3D printing, the fact that more of our value is digitally delivered, it allows us to economically produce smaller and smaller experiences or products or parts so that we can personalize for them at a cost-competitive rate. Now we have the cost of distance. We make things far away, and we have to ship them. We don't know if supply chains are going to be broken. We're going to have to start paying more for the carbon tax in order to transport it. So the cost of distance increases. And then at the middle, we have growing expectations of proximate, personalized experiences. Take all of these together, and here's where I propose we're going in your sector and in every sector. I call it proximity. That value is going to get created closer and closer to the moment of demand in time and space. This machine, you may have seen it, it can produce any variety of sodas. How can it do that? It waits and waits and waits until you press the button for a decaf, diet, cherry, vanilla Sprite. And it combines the syrup with the soda at the moment of demand. The same technology that allows us to do that allows us to make this machine, which creates 15 generic drugs from raw materials. So think of it as you create value when you're combining things. Let's wait and wait and wait and combine them closer to when and where your customers want them. And we see this across every sector. Food getting grown closer and closer to where it's needed. Parts getting manufactured closer and closer to when and where it's needed. This is a company called Quick Parts. They've got locations around the world, and if you need a part that needs to get replaced, you can send them the 3D drawing, and they can print it and locally and ship it rapidly. Wasp 3D builds buildings for companies like Dior just with 3D printing. We see automation of manufacturing. I was in China and I saw this plant. And when they're building a washing machine, I was looking at the screen of like where they were, the jobs they were tracking. I thought it was going to say Best Buy, 5 red, whatever, washing machines of this make. But no, it said Jane Smith, Dallas, Texas, and this specific machine. They're making customized, personalized products on demand. So a great question for us to ask is, what does P equal 0 look like in our industry? And a way to think that through is to say, what need do we really, really serve? When does that need emerge? How can we get closer to sensing when that need emerges? How do we create value? It's probably by combining certain things. And what we want to do is not combine those things ahead of time in anticipation, but we would like to do it later. What would it look like to do it at the same place and at the same time as need arousal? So that'll be the first inquiry in terms of looking at where the next battleground is. That's the first play in the playbook. Play for tomorrow rather than today. The next thing I think is really powerful is coordinating the uncoordinated. The ability of us to coordinate things, thanks to many of these digital technologies, has changed the economics and allows us to coordinate things in new ways. That's why we see the emergence of these platform models, of course, Uber and Airbnb, but also equipment share allows you to access a fleet of machines that are digitally connected and not have to own things. You will see over and over again people trying to create the Uber of engineering or the Uber of civil engineering. And we know there are lots of issues with that, and that's probably not the way it should go. But these guys are going to try it. Someone else is going to try it. Blockchain, I think, is just another iteration of this ability to coordinate the uncoordinated in new ways. And part of the reason this is possible is that every space is becoming digitized. Farms are smart and connected, warehouses are smart and connected, construction sites, manufacturing plants, industrial plants. And what we're going to see is as these things get digitized, we're going to see across every sector some pattern like this. With agriculture, the end consumer is going to start cooking in a smart kitchen. They're going to get that food from smart retail or service providers. They're going to get that from smart logistics chains. They're going to get that from smart processing, and it's just going to work its way back, and it's going to get digitized in each stage. But then what's going to be really exciting is not only is the production plant going to be able to tell the aggregator and trading exactly how many soybean stock, how much my soybean stock is and how much it will cost and make decisions like that, they're going to start communicating with each other. And so we're going to move from a supply chain to sort of like a connected ecosystem. So we want to think about how do we plug into that connected ecosystem. I'd like to now apply this now internally. This is really exciting. Now, the ability to coordinate things used to be most efficient when we coordinated hierarchically. That's why most firms are run like centrally planned economies. You've got a boss who decides where money goes, who works on what people get paid. But we know centrally planned economies don't work in dynamic environments. And so we're starting to see a new form of organization emerging. Going back to that Chinese manufacturer, they were called Haier. Haier, by the way, is not just in China. They bought GE Appliances about 7 years ago. At that point, they were $5 billion in revenue. And then 7 years later, they reached $32 billion in revenue. If you ask them how they generated that growth, they said, well, what we did was we took our hierarchy and we broke it down into 4,000 micro enterprises, teams of about 10. Each one has a CEO. If the CEO is not doing a good job, they can get voted out by the people that report to them. But then they thought, what about our engineering department? What about our finance department? What about our accounting department? They shouldn't have a monopoly. We're going to break them down into micro enterprises of about 10, and they have to try to sell their services internally. And if they can't get a team internally to buy their software or their IT services, then basically their budget gets cut, but it gets cut because of an internal marketplace, not because of a centralized budgeting process. And what we've found as we've researched this is that if you adopt elements of this, you can significantly outperform the competition. Just the first one, if your employees consider themselves entrepreneurs rather than employees, you're 6 times more likely to be in the top quintile of performance in your ability to recruit and retain top talent. So just that could give you a 6x advantage. a 3x advantage in overall financial performance. And I won't go through all of these. If you want, I've got this HBR piece that I wrote about this, and we can go through it. But let's just say if you start adopting or exploring these more decentralized models rather than the traditional hierarchical model, there are signs that this could be really beneficial. All of this has to do with there are new ways to coordinate things, coordinating the uncoordinated. Make sense? So these are mindset shifts. We're playing for tomorrow rather than today. We're coordinating rather than controlling. Just those two lenses are going to start us seeing and choosing different options. But there are three more that I think are good to add, and I'm going to do these ones a little bit more succinctly. Force a two-front battle basically says that we want to not define ourselves by our industry. Successful companies don't define themselves by their industry. They define themselves by something else that allows them to behave differently. And part of this has to do with the fact that, as I said, the job to be done that we thought our customers were paying us for isn't the job to be done. That was just one way to get the job done. So look at Airbnb. If we look at Airbnb's SEC statement, the way they define their business is Airbnb is a community based on connection and belonging. Let's look at Marriott's definition. Marriott International, Inc., is a worldwide operator, franchisor, and licensor of hotel, residential, and timeshare properties. Which company has more freedom in defining their strategy or pursuing their opportunities? What this does is it forces Marriott on a two-front battle. I consider it a two-front battle because Marriott has to keep competing with other hospitality companies, but now it also is being flanked by this weirdly behaving community company that is doing things very differently across all the 9 Ps. Or these two Googlers, they sold their company to Google, they did their mandatory 3 years, they left. They decided they're looking for something to do, and unfortunately, the nephew of one of them got cancer. And so he went around to assist his nephew in his oncology visits, and he realized that oncology was really broken. They would treat you, and then they had to look up what the treatment they gave you in the next visit, or he went to the next oncologist. That oncologist didn't know what the other oncologist did. And he said, all right, let's fix this. We're going to create Flatiron Health to improve lives by learning from the experience of every cancer patient. They'll go to oncologists and say, we're going to offer you this practice management software company, this practice management software, but we're not really a practice management software company. We're really a data company. And what we do is we observe your treatment, all following compliance and the rest. And we're going to give you insights. When you do this, repeatedly, the outcome is better. Oncologist signs up. They go to the next oncologist and say, we're going to not only give you insights in your data, but we're going to give you insights about what other oncologists are doing so you can learn from them. And what do oncologists care about? They care about outcomes. So they're super excited. They sign up 2,000 of these companies. They change the way the FDA treats treatment data. And then 7 years later, Roche Pharmaceutical buys them for $2.1 billion. So $2.1 billion in value creation, that wasn't their only purpose. But $2.1 billion in value creation by holding on to the self-identity. Peter Drucker said strategy is the answer to the question, what business are you really in? And let's not define that as engineering. You're not an engineering firm. You're a something else firm that happens to do engineering. So that's the next one. The next one is be good. And you can see these all you're going to see they all kind of build on each other. So be good basically says that the old paradigm of business, which is that companies exist to maximize shareholder value, that is giving way to a different paradigm, which says that the best strategy is one when your growth is good for multiple stakeholders. When your growth is good for the community, employees, the government, the country, the environment, the world, it's a better strategy. Now, what I'm not saying necessarily is it's good to do good. I think it is. But if all you cared about was shareholder value creation, that's all you cared about. And if you took a long-term perspective, what you see is the logical thing to do is to create a situation where you don't create resistance for your growth, where everyone wants you to win, then you have no competition, and you maximize shareholder value. You don't get to choose if you take a long-term perspective. The two combine. My wife used to be the general counsel for North America of MasterCard, working under this guy, Ajay Banga. Ajay Banga took the stock price from $25 a share to $350 a share. How did he do that? He said, we realized that we could be a force for good. What he meant was our market opportunity was also a social opportunity. Our market opportunity is to steal market share away, not from Visa or American Express, but to steal it away from cash. And so he started talking about this. Kill cash was his idea. His communications department encouraged him to change it to a world beyond cash. He starts talking about a world beyond cash. And it would go like this. Look, in a world beyond cash, a drug dealer is not going to sell drugs to your child without that being traceable. Governments aren't going to send money down to their citizens and have it be pilfered off by middlemen. It goes directly in the cash. We are a for-profit company. We see the market opportunity as cash, but by the way, by pursuing that, we create a better world. What does that do? It activates ecosystem partners, NGOs, governments, regulators. They want to get behind you. He's now the president of the World Bank. Increasingly, companies are winning through ecosystems. John Deere, I think, is a great example of this. They've been killing it for 5-10 years in the ag sector. And what they've done is they've taken this view that we need to create precision farming for all of these social reasons. They talk about it, they write about it, they speak about it, and it activates partners that want to plug into their system. And in order to activate ecosystems, we need to have a mission that they see themselves in. I think there are also great opportunities to change the business model to align. I buy my children these gift cards for holidays and for birthdays. I just want to show you a short video of my daughter explaining why she took her $50 and she decided to buy Amazon stock. This is Kaida.
What you invest in?
Amazon. And the Amazon thing went up 91.67% higher.
Wow. For how long?
I don't know. And I got $9.17 more.
Nice. You made $9.17 without doing anything.
Yeah.
Isn't that nice to make money without doing anything?
But look at how it goes.
Wow. Why did you invest in Amazon?
Because I like Amazon. Because I get toys and movies. Amazon Prime there.
So you figure it's a good company?
Yeah. Plus they bought Whole Foods.
Oh, good.
And I had it before they bought Whole Foods, so it went like...
Isn't that great? I love that here she was a 16-year-old girl, and she's relating to Amazon not just as a customer, but as an investor. And I think that her future financial health is much more secure because of that. And so we can engineer our business models to align with such outcomes, and that will allow us to be more successful. So that's the fourth one, is asking how can we create strategic power by being good? And the last one, I'm going to share this one, then I'm going to just close by talking about analyze how we select the ideas, and we'll move to questions. So we're playing for tomorrow rather than today. We're coordinating, we're not controlling. We're not defining ourselves by our industry. We're pursuing multiple stakeholder goodness rather than just shareholder goodness. And those four lenses are having us see and choose play differently. One more that I think is a lot of fun and important is create something out of nothing. Many of the games that we play, especially in the West, follow this rule that you can't take a queen out of your back pocket and put it next to my king. You can't add an extra player to the football field, right? We have these rules, but there are other games. In Go, the rules are the opposite. In Go, you can't move the pieces on the board. When they're down, you don't slide them. You can only add or remove them. So I'm not saying one is a better way to play than the other, but they're very different ways to play the game. So what if we could only add or remove things? What if we could just add customers? Tony Fernandez did this. 2001, he quit his job. He was an accountant. He bought an airline. It cost him 27 cents. It was bankrupt. He grew it into the second largest discount airline in the world. His core idea was, let's not compete for airline customers. Too much competition for them. Let's compete for not airline customers. These are people who are maybe just staying at home, or they're taking the train, or they're driving. And he went through the 9 Ps, and he adjusted the strategy to appeal to them. What this is an example of is what's called non-consumption. When someone is not using your services or your competitor's services, it's for one of 4 reasons. 1, price, they can't afford it, or they don't think they can afford it. Access, they don't have access to you. They don't know how to reach you. They don't have the know-how. It feels complicated. They don't know how to engage with an engineer. They don't know how to check in and pre-check. Or time. I'm too busy. I'm running the way I need to run. I don't have time to stop and think of working with you. So you look for these pockets of non-consumption and say, which of these is the dam that's holding back that non-consumption? Let's remove that dam and unlock the non-consumption. Another great example of this is categories and Urban Outfitters. It's a company that when I first wrote my first book in 2004, I would tell this story a lot. And then for 20 years, they were doing great. And then for the last 10 years, they weren't doing so great. So I haven't been able, but now I can talk about it again. Their stock price has nearly doubled in the last 3 years, mostly because they introduced this as a service model, which is a rental as a service. Does anyone know Rent the Runway? So they basically, yes, you're not the only one that raised their hands. They basically like saw Rent the Runway working, but growing, showing there was market, but they weren't profitable, and they know how to do it right. They had a capability already of managing used clothing. They launched this. Now they're earning, I think it's only like a few years in, but they're earning $100 million a quarter on this business, and it's profitable. As a service, I think, is a great way to think of introducing a category. Salesforce introduces software as a service. Netflix introduces entertainment as a service. Rolls-Royce sells propulsion as a service. We can go over and over again. But it's really interesting just to change the denominator of what you sell and say, what would it look like to sell infrastructure as a service? To sell sustainability as a service? To sell resilience as a service? And think that through how you would deliver on that. This is coming, and we see this trend in every industry. And creating categories is fun, and it also is disruptive. Gatorade, for example. They were selling salty water on football fields for years and years and years, and Pepsi and Coke didn't see them growing because in their market share report, there was no line item for sports drink. Or same thing Red Bull did with energy drinks. So it's really fun to sit back and say, if we had a magic wand, what would you like to add to the game? What new service, what new members, what new customers, what stakeholders, what occasions, what categories, what needs? And what this will do is expand your option set and have you start embodying the new playbook, asking these 5 questions. So I'm going to close up with just a suggestion of what we do with those ideas. So imagine we've stepped out into the future. That's like your problem statement, right? Dissect, I've given you 9 Ps. That's really kind of like the root cause analysis, if you will, but we're not looking for root causes, but we're looking for different solution leverage points. Expand is the ideation of solutions. And here's the problem. When we get to analyze and we start choosing the option is that the 4th option will make your competitors ignore and laugh at you. Why will they ignore and laugh at you? Because that solution is inconsistent with the rules we believe to be true, those rules being defined by what worked in the past, by the old game. Do you see the logic in that? We're not solving against physical laws, we're solving against human laws, and those laws have changed. And so the solution that will be the right solution will likely be the one that looks impossible. Never interrupt someone doing what you said couldn't be done. Super simple solution to this. Just take a tip from Albert Einstein, who said, it's not that I'm so smart, it's that I stay with problems longer. So what I suggest you do, I know it sounds remarkably simple, but many companies just don't do it. Take all your ideas and plot them on a 2x2 matrix. Is it easy or difficult? If we did it, would it be high or low impact? Take your waste of time, get rid of them. Here's a tip. If you include on your list things that you're currently doing, you'll realize you're actually wasting time. Stop doing those things, reinvest that energy more strategically. You'll end up with a bunch of tactics. Easy thing to do with tactics is just create a list every month or every quarter, just work them down, just do them, delegate them, get them done. What you're going to want to do is focus on the winning moves, the low-hanging fruit, right? This is logical, the easy, high impact. But the problem is the 4th option won't appear there because it will be inconsistent with a bunch of beliefs that we hold that are no longer true. And so it will appear to be a crazy idea. What do most companies do with crazy ideas? Put them on the back burner until someone else does them. What does an innovator do? They sit with them. They say, hey, maybe the technology actually exists. Let's spend, let's go back to ChatGPT and let's ask ChatGPT, like, do you find a technology that could do, and you're probably going to find it. And you're like, wow, this is much cheaper. This came out earlier before. I think AI is going to be a huge advantage to you because all those software companies that are trying to get between you and your customers, you're going to be able to replicate what they do at a really low cost thanks to no code. A lot of this technology is going to be cheap and fast and easy to get. And then work on that crazy idea and then choose your 4th option. So I'm going to conclude just by summarizing here. We've got imagine, dissect, expand, analyze, sell. Mental time travel, what's the tool we have? We have those 5 steps. Then for the system, dissecting the system, I've given you the 9 Ps. For expanding and option generation, I've given you the 5 stratagems. For choosing, I've given you this 2x2 matrix. We haven't done anything on sell, which is influence. As you do that, though, I want to give you a forewarning. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to put your slow horses first. And your slow horses are going to be so slow, none of them are going to cross the line before the prince's fastest horses. And your family will say you're crazy. Your investors will tell you you're wrong. Your father will hide his head in shame. Your kids will get up and leave. Everyone will be laughing at you. But if you have the fortitude to then play the next heat, you put your fastest horses first. The prince has already run his fastest horses, right? He has to play his medium horses. And your fastest horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's medium horses, so it's 1-to-1. And in the third heat, your medium horses are just fast enough that they can beat the prince's slowest horses. And for the first time ever, the general wins. That's how we win the next game. I think we have time for questions now. This is my contact information. If you want to reach out to me, thank you.